Does anybody, like, if you're just going to take a crack at defining what a rain garden is in a sentence, what is it?
It's a pit in the ground, or a depression, like a little gully, and water can flow into that and slowly make its way through the soil, and then keep the soil good, and at some point make its way to a stream and to the river.
Great. And why was the Pioneer Valley Planning Association excited about rain gardens, dude?
Because our sewer system is over 100 years old. It's reached capacity, and the more trees we take out, the more water gets dumped into those sewers, and they mitigate that issue.
Right.
Talk a little louder. I'm really having trouble hearing what you're saying.
Right.
It's loud and everybody's soft.
Do we need to
our
pull
sewer
our
systems are over
circle
100
up?
years old and they're at capacity, and they need to do something to mitigate that because they're not going to replace the sewers.
Right. So we're using depressions in the soil, planted typically in perennial plants, to absorb water into the soil instead of having it shunt off a parking lot and quickly go into a stream and then overburden the sewer system, or go directly into rivers and streams and become what they call flashy, which is not like a red sports car, but it's when the level of the in-stream water level goes up very quickly and often scours that stream channel, making it deeper and steeper sided and not having a lot of good habitat value in it, and then kind of also lowering the water table as it does that, because those streams often set the kind of, imagine as the drain in your bathtub. As those get deeper, the water level in the soil goes deeper. So by infiltrating water into the ground off of impervious surfaces, we increase the shallow groundwater level in the immediate vicinity, reduce the pressure on our streams and rivers, reduce the pressure on our sewer systems, and can do awesome things with the water, like have beautiful perennial gardens. Rain gardens don't need to be necessarily planted in perennial gardens, like a stormwater infiltration basin, which you've probably seen at every, like in Hadley at the mall or whatever. It could be just in turf grass, but it's taking an opportunity for the conditions that are created to plant more interesting, more beautiful habitat. Any questions or thoughts about that before we?
Yeah, could you clarify that? I think you said it doesn't need to be planted with plants, but I thought one of the points was to put plants that help to actually mitigate to slow the water down.
Right. So it doesn't need to be necessarily planted with fancy plants, I should say.
Okay.
Turf grass will do in a lot of cases, but the thing that's interesting about a rain garden is the root structure and the ecosystem that those plants create in the soil. The bacteria and other flora and fauna that's in the soil actually can help break down some of the contamination that might come off of a parking lot. And it also does help just mechanically slow down that water flow and increase the porosity of the soil so it can infiltrate a little better. I mean, you've probably, if we tried to reach our hands into this soil, it's pretty hard, whereas over there, it's pretty easy. So, yeah.
So, there is near a strip mall here in Springfield, there is something that I look at it and think somebody wanted that to be a rain garden.
Yeah.
I've never walked over to it and looked down, so I assumed something's growing in it, but I don't see anything. There are no buildings around it, so it's not like water is flowing down and would have landed on an impervious surface, but now gets to go into this rain garden. And when I see it, I'm driving along a road along the side of this strip mall, and there's a curb. So it's not like when the water hits the road, it could make its way over there.
Right.
Is there a parking lot in front of the mall?
Well, not anywhere near where this
Yeah.
ditch is.
Yeah, so that might be more, so like the distinction between a rain garden and a more engineered detention or retention basin that you see a lot is that the rain garden is usually connected by surface flow. Whereas that might be connected by underground pipes that are collecting it from like storm drains in the parking lot or somewhere off the buildings, and they're coming in and they're not.
Okay, I'm gonna feel better about it now. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe. And, Rachel, do you want to talk about the rain gardens at, like, river mills, for instance, and some of the weirdness that happens with, like, plantings there sometimes?
Yeah, so one of the places that we're working right now, River Mill Center, which is a new community center in Chicopee, and it's right at the confluence of the Chicopee and the Connecticut rivers. It's an old brownfield site. It was highly developed, and they had a wonderful concept when they created the center to infiltrate all of the water from the parking lots into the stormwater detention basins and then have that infiltrate before it goes into the Chicopee River. And the original intention of the basins, during the planning process, there was a bit of a miscommunication about what that plant matter was going to be. And so one vision was to have a kind of a wildflower meadow, natural landscape in these detention basins in the parking lot for maximum water infiltration, because actually grasses have incredible root systems and their roots can penetrate very, very deep into the ground. And so it's not that, we're the way that we manage turf often increases compaction, really frequent mowing, poor soil structure to begin with when grass is seeded. But when you think of the prairies and you think of the depth of the soil and the infiltration capacity there, we can actually use grasses in a really fabulous way to sequester carbon and to infiltrate water. But the detention basins were created at such a level that it's really not possible to mow them and manage them like grasses. And so what happened there is they're just unmanageable with the crew at Chicopee. And so it has become a really amazing example of every urban weed you have ever seen anywhere. And there's no longer any sense of design. And it's become a really contested landscape because the people who arrive there to come to the community center are recognizing what they consider as, nuisance plants, an undesigned landscape. And so even though they're functioning really well or moderately well from a stormwater infiltration point of view, they are capturing the water. There were some other issues with the installation. The aesthetic and the plant function part of it has really failed. And so we're working with them to start renovating that and to come back to the drawing board and the concept and say, okay, if the form functions really well from a water management perspective, how can we maintain that success but also create a successful landscape for the people and the community that's there and for the management? Because as you know, if the landscape doesn't meet the tools, it doesn't meet the needs for the people who are actually in charge of maintaining it, it's not going to be successful. It's always a play because we are the actors in our own environment. We're the ones that are creating the gardens, and at the end of the day, we have our criteria for environmental reasons and for other reasons, but we need to make sure that they work for us as people as well. So we're learning a lot, actually, through coming in and correcting some other people's mistakes in that project.
Can you say what the alternative is to this wild meadow?
Yeah, so we're looking at a reestablishment of the surface layer. So we're probably going to Yeah, so we have an interim kind of intervention for this year, which was to weed whack very, very, very low and kind of scarify the top surface of that. And we're using agricultural cover crops this year. So we've asked them to establish a mix of red clover and annual rye, crimson clover and annual rye, which are two. So the crimson clover is a nitrogen fixer, and the annual rye is a quick cover that sprouts very quickly and has deep roots. And the crimson clover has a shallower root. So we're mixing up a diversity in the root system, which is really important for soil health. And so for this year, we're hoping that they can just establish some kind of soil remediation cover crop that has some uniformity to it, so that these basins start to become something that is a recognizable color and vegetative pattern, rather than this completely patchworked set of different plants and patterns that don't have any kind of aesthetic correlation to each other. And then longer term, we're hoping to come in and we need to reassess the surface soil, because the fertility in those was probably never what was spec'd for the plants that were supposed to have been planted there. And the overall goal is to establish something that resembles a wildflower meadow, but we are working with the DPW, the management in the city of Chicopee, to reevaluate what tools they're using. So if they don't have electric string trimmers, for example, or they don't have flame weeders to be able to manage the stone and the curb entrances where the water flows in, which become weedy messes because they don't have the labor to hand pull out of the stones. But flame weeders would be a way that you could do that with a lot less management. So we're working with them to come up with a plant community that is appropriate to those, and also a management regime that allows them to do what they need to do in the time frame that they have with the skills that they have, and that so it's a dual shift to try to meet a longer term plan.
In a facility, in something like that, do you ever think to use native grasses as opposed to the agricultural plants?
Yeah, and that was the original intention. It wasn't executed, and that's what the longer term plan will be. So this is something that we can use as it's used in agriculture, really. So they're both annual crops. They're meant to cover the soil, protect the soil, increase the fertility, and, as an interim thing, as they should be used in agriculture as well.
And so, next year,
okay, so you plant it because it's for this year only. And next year, you can be putting together a plan for next year while this is growing.
Yeah,
Exactly.
COVID happened when we were doing the planning, and so this was all supposed to happen last year.
Got it.
So now we needed some innovation.
I'm just curious about what kind of grass was planted originally. Do you know?
It was a mix of native perennials. So it was like Indian grass and switchgrass and.
So will you try to preserve some of those?
None of them are there. None of them
They're
are
not
present.
even there.
Yeah, they didn't establish.
Oh.
They didn't establish.
Oh.
And part of them, some of them were actually planted in turf, like purchased turf. And that was never established because it was never designed. There was a miscommunication in the installation. And so that's actually apparent now. There's a dead turf mulch layer in the detention basins that is washing out in sections, and you can literally peel it up like a piece of giant thick cardboard, and it's the sod.
They didn't have irrigation, they didn't have proper weeding, they didn't have all the things. So one of the things that's amazing about this place is the work you all did and your comrades in establishing this. We planted the same year, 2015, we planted 3 other rain gardens, and we were responsible for planting. The client was responsible for weeding. The rest of the sites didn't look very good. This site was just awesome looking every time we came. And part of, I think, what Rachel was saying is sort of like rain gardens are flexible and you need to scale the planting approach to the amount of labor that you have. I was thinking one thing we could do is bring the Chicopee Master Gardeners over who or maintaining that site to here, and just like stoke a little competition fire underneath them.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the Chicopee Master Gardeners are taking care of some of the perennial gardens that are closer to the building. They were never tasked
Right.
with these beds, so they were never asked to maintain the rain garden portion of this site. And the perennial gardens are beautiful. They could use some of the same impetus toward establishing more ground covers. It's a little bit of a mulch heavy site, but they've done a beautiful job in the gardens around the building itself. But I think that this is just a little bit of a stretch. So it's a wonderful idea to bring them over here, and also, just a lesson in making sure that your design not only functions properly, but also fits the maintenance regime that it needs to in order to be successful.
Right. Yeah, there are also these small patches in the middle of a giant, super hot parking lot. So, which gets to the thing about the sort of engineering of rain gardens. Rain gardens are really, you're designing a whole system to deal with what is often thought of as an engineering problem, right? So with engineering, an engineering approach is you have a receiving area, a big impervious surface like a parking lot or a roof, and water comes and hits that, it gets collected, and then the old way to deal with it is you pipe it away as quickly as possible, and it's all about sizing the pipes. In this approach, we also use the sort of that same engineering approach, but we say, okay, what's the capacity of this earth to drink up the water that's being generated? So a rain garden has three main components. It has a receiving area, the impervious surface like the roof. It has the conveyance, or the alternative to the pipe. Sometimes they are in fact pipes, but it's how the water gets from the roof to the third part, which is the absorption area. And so here, our main receiving area, our main impervious surface is this side of this building. And you'll notice it has these maroon downspouts on the side. So we capture the water that comes down those and use just these, what were stone-lined trenches that have since pretty much sedimented in with sand, to move that water toward a few small infiltration basins along the way. And then because we had all this extra area to work with, because there was this large lawn and the previous director said, eat up as much of that as you want. The master gardeners will be so happy just to weed however big of a garden you make. Sorry, Janet. We did get pretty wild and actually sized this rain garden so that in the event that the neighbors thought, oh, this is cool, we would love to infiltrate our garden, our rainwater too, they could actually do that. So this rain garden is like triple sized. In my recollection, and we can double check, the way you do it is you measure the length and the width of the building, and then figure out what portion of that roof is coming down which downspouts. And so we have about half the building, and I think so we're capturing 75 feet of length by about, I think it's, let's call it 30 feet because it's easier math. So 150 plus 75, 2,250 square feet of impervious surface, let's say, roughly. And it turns out when rain falls from the sky onto a surface like a roof, about every 100 square feet of roof generates a little over 60 gallons of water for every inch of rain that falls. So if anybody wanted to do some quick math, they could multiply 60 by 2,225. And I think in my recollection, it was we needed to infiltrate somewhere around 1,000 gallons of water every 1 inch rainstorm. But because climate change, and so we have more frequent giant rainstorms. And so we actually sized this garden for a 3-inch rainstorm, and then we doubled it because of the neighbor. So the capacity of this garden is pretty enormous, and that's why you have that big depression down there. And so our firm specializes in ecological landscape design and trying to think about how do we utilize on-site resources and also make use of materials that we generate to do the things that we're doing. So rather than excavating the soil from the big infiltration basin and just shipping it off to a landfill for daily cover where they dump it on top of the trash, we decided to make a berm along the road, which you're all very familiar with. And that actually made this whole auxiliary infiltration area. So this is like a super rain garden. It's a hurricane rain garden.